reading from EVERNIGHT by Ross Mackenzie. Today is chapter 9, The White Witch. Double Eight's heart beat furiously as he snuck out of bed in the still darkness of the dormitory. The room was long and narrow and bare, lined on either side with 25 identical metal bunks, 50 beds in total, and in 49 of these, white witches slumbered. Double Eight stared around as best he could. The only light came from the tall arched window at the end of the dormitory. The silence was broken by the drum of his pulse and the gentle snores of the sleeping white witches. Wearing a plain white nightgown, Double Eight crept silently through the dormitory, casting wary glances. He had no doubt that the others would report him if they saw him out of bed, and the punishment would be brutal. Worse still, if anyone discovered the reason he was out of bed, well, then he'd have to face Mrs. Hester, and everybody knew what she did to traitors. Things were changing. Double Eight could feel it in his bones. Recently there had been rumours of runaways, mutterings that the hags from Westerly Witch had finally found a way to rescue white witches from slavery. As the rumours had grown, so had Double Eight's desires to listen to the voice inside him, the one that had always been there, that had begun as a seedling in his mind and grown and blossomed until he was fit to burst. The voice told Double Eight that there was more to life than servitude. And then, a moon or so back, there had been the strange incident with the beggar. Double Eight had been trudging along the streets, a speck in a white witch river, heading towards the spell factories for another day's work in the heat of the cauldrons, when the commotion had startled him. As he came nearer, he discovered that an old crippled man, a beggar, had fallen on the wet cobbles and could not get up. He was moaning and pleading for assistance, and yet the white witches were ignoring him, walking around him, over him, as if he did not exist. Double Eight could not simply leave the old man there to be trodden on, so he helped him up and fetched him his crutch. "Oh, light lady, bless you," the beggar exclaimed as Double Eight helped him over to a ledge on which he could recover. "Bless the white witches, bless the king." When Double Eight tried to turn away, the old man had grabbed his hand with a tremendous grip. His eyes had been bright and quick. "Do you wish to be free?" Double Eight had been struck dumb by this sudden outburst, but the beggar smiled. "Your eyes give it away," he said. "There's humanity in 'em, life. Hester didn't get all your soul, boy. She left a little bit in there. You do want freedom, don't you?" Double Eight glanced back at the joyless, stony faces of his fellow white witches. More than anything, the beggar was still clutching his hand tight. "We'll be in touch," he said, and he spun Double Eight around and pushed him back towards the witches. When Double Eight glanced back, the beggar was gone. The first paper bird had arrived a few days later, in the dead of night, turning to smoke as soon as he'd read its message. "You are not alone, Double Eight. We are watching. We are close by, and we will help you when the time is right." They began to arrive quite regularly, and he'd sit up in the dark and wait for the quiet sound of the flapping paper wings. "Westerly Witch can offer you a new life. We can protect you. The time is close." Tonight, Double Eight was following the directions of the most recent message, only the second paper bird to have requested a reply. The first, last week, had prompted him to find a safe place to stow away an object roughly the size of a matchbox. Double Eight had taken a great risk by smuggling a butter knife out of the food hall and keeping it in his lumpy mattress. Over the course of the several nights, he had used the knife to loosen one of the floorboards by his bed. Tonight's risk, though, was far greater. When he reached for the door handle, Double Eight's hand shook badly. He tightened his grip, clenched his jaw, then scouting around the sleeping dormitory, he turned the handle. opened the door and slipped out into the passageway. The White Witch district was in the east of King's Haven, near the huge factories where the White Witches were put to work. The district comprised of a number of huge institutional buildings, grand and stern and colourless, housing every White Witch, housing every White Witch in the city. White Witches were afforded no luxuries by the Silver Kingdom. Their buildings contained no carpeting or decoration, no splashes of colour. 88 flinched at the sound of his bare feet on the floorboards, knowing any tiny creak was a danger. The building was in darkness. The dragon breath lamps were all out, but 88 was glad of the cover of night, even if it made the shadows sometimes seem like living things. Along the passage, out into a wider corridor, and then through another door to the huge entrance hall. This was where the most danger lay. Streams of moon and lamplight gushed in through a huge arched window. In order to get where he wanted to go, 88 would have to walk through that light. Stooping low, he dashed to the top of the staircase and then down the stairs. He reached the bottom step when footsteps came echoing towards him. 88's heart almost stopped. For a few seconds he stood motionless, one foot on the floor, the other still planted on the stair. The steps were coming nearer along the main corridor. Any minute they'd walk through the double doors into the hallway and catch sight of him. To the right of the stairway was the front desk, a counter where a receptionist would sit in the daytime. 88 made a dash for it, leaping over and landing on the floor on the other side just as two senior White Witches entered the hallway from the corridor. 88 cupped a hand over his mouth, tried to breathe silent and slow. Through a gap at the bottom of the counter he could see the feet shuffling past the desk, and light from their wands reflecting on their white shoes, casting shadows on the bare wooden floors. They did not speak, but walked in the familiar, stony silence common amongst White Witches. When the light died away, 88 lay on the floor a while longer, until at last he gathered enough courage to peek over the desk. All clear. He came out slowly, then dashed across the corridor. Soon he found the correct door and hurried down into the bowels of the building, until at last he arrived in one of the large laundry rooms. Roaring lamps always burned here to dry the newly washed clothes. The perimeter was lined with stone washing tubs, and drying ropes crisscrossed the place, hung with newly washed gowns, making it impossible to see from one side of the room to the other. The smell of smoke nipped at the nose. 88 stood very still. A voice in his head was screaming at him. Go back to bed, you idiot, and forget any of this ever happened. But 88 did not go back. Hello? He spoke in a hushed tone, but his voice seemed very harsh in the silence, and he flinched at the sound of it. Are you there? Nothing. 88 gazed desperately around. In the gloom of the hanging white clothes, they looked like ghosts. And then, from amongst those ghosts, came a voice. Well done, 88. You've been brave. 88 swung around, fighting, shaking with fright. Come out, he said. Come out so I can see you. Forgive me if I don't, love, said the voice, a woman's voice. I reckon it's better, in my position, to keep out of sight. You understand? 88 nodded. I think so. Good. Now, before we go any further, my dear, before I decide what happens next, I must ask a question. Why are you doing this? 88 frowned into the dark. A hesitation. Because I want to be free. It was the first time 88 had ever said those words, and he was shocked at the power of them, how they surged through him and lit his blood on fire. I want to live properly alive. White Witches, we're not allowed to be part of the world, you know. We're spectators. I don't want to be a spectator. I want to feel things and go places and tell my own story. There was a moment of quiet in the laundry room. "Right," said the voice. "I reckon I can help you. But freedom isn't easy. Your problems won't vanish. And before we make this happen, there's something we must discuss." "My soul?" said Double Eight bitterly. "Yes, your soul. Mrs. Hester has it, locked away in a secret place with the souls of all the other White Witches. If you come with me, you'll have to leave it behind." A terrible sickness rose in Double Eight's guts. "But how can I be free without my soul?" A pause. "Have you ever wondered, love, what makes you different to the other White Witches? You ever considered why it might be that you have thoughts of freedom and magic and friendship, whilst the others seem content to just exist the way they do?" "Of course I have. I have to hide those thoughts every day." "Mrs. Hester's powers are not what they were," said the woman, and there was satisfaction in her tone. "Her grip is loosening. When you were very young, she took away your soul, but she didn't get all of it. She missed a bit. There's enough of you left in there to wonder and dream and feel. And there's more like you. Some have come over to our side in recent months. We hope, one day, to find the place where she keeps her stolen souls and set them all free. But until then, at least we can help White Witches like you." Double Eight stared into the dark, pressed a hand to his chest, felt his heart beating quick and clear. He had always known he was different. He had never imagined there was some soul left in him, that a precious, shining part of him was hiding in plain sight. It was wonderful and frightening and terrible all at once. The voice said, "The choice is yours, Double Eight. If you feel leaving is too dangerous, you can go back to bed and forget this meeting ever happened." "No, I'd go mad. I want out." The sound of glass on the floor, something rolling, and Double Eight felt an object nudge his foot. He picked it up, a tiny spell bottle, and stared disbelieving at the fizzing wisp of buttery yellow magic inside. He had, of course, never seen a hag spell, but he knew instantly that this was one, because it was colourful and warm and seemed full of wild imagination. And the sound of it was not the dreary, monotonous whisper of a White Witch spell. It was twinkling music that gladdened his heart. This was as different from the sterile, colourless magic of White Witches as fire from ice. "What's this?" "A spell. It'll help you travel far from the rest of your soul without great suffering." Double Eight reached for the stopper. "Not now," said the voice urgently. "Getting you out will take planning. My team on the outside will need to prepare, and the spell takes time to work. A few drops on your skin every night until you hear word from us of the plan. The message I sent last week, the one asking you to find a hiding place for something small. Did you manage it?" Double Eight nodded. "Good lad. Keep the spell there. When it's time to go, I'll send a bird with instructions. Got it? I suppose stay out of trouble till then. Stay brave." Double Eight opened his mouth to speak, but he heard a swirling sound, saw some of the hanging clothes around the room sway in a breeze, and now he could feel that he was alone in the laundry room. With a shake of his hand, Double Eight sent the hag magic in the bottle back to sleep. The yellow light died, and the musical whisper was silenced. Then he began the journey back to the dorm, feeling as if he was carrying the greatest secret in all the world. Back in the dormitory, Double Eight crouched beside his little bed, surrounded by snores and sighs of the sleeping White Witches, and retrieved the butter knife from his mattress. When he'd levered the floorboard up, he took the spell bottle and stuffed it into the gap, and then he clicked the board back into place. "What are you doing?" Double Eight almost yelled out in fright. The sound of a voice in the dormitory was unusual any time, never mind the middle of the night. He slid the butter knife up his sleeve and looked over his shoulder. 103 stood at the foot of the bed, sleepily staring down at him. 103 was 12 years old, a year younger than 88, and 88 didn't think he'd ever heard him speak before. "I couldn't sleep." "Why are you on the floor?" 103's voice was flat, far away, and emotionless. There was no spark of life in his eyes. "A mouse," said 88. "I thought I saw a mouse." 103's eyes lingered on 88. "Go back to bed or I'm telling. No one is supposed to be out of bed after dark." "You're right," said 88. "I will." 103 walked away. As 88 climbed under his sheets, he shot a glance at the place in the floor where the spell was hidden. The floorboard seemed to be properly back in place, but had 103 seen anything? No, 88 didn't think so. His head was bursting with thoughts and plans and danger, his heart thudding. He doubted sleep would come. It would be a long night.